All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking into a really interesting topic,
Yeah.
which is how AI is changing the game when it comes to financial fraud.
Right.
It's something that affects pretty much everyone these days,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It does.
whether it's those annoying like little credit card scams or even like bigger stuff with investments, everyone's kind of worried about it. But the good news is that AI is stepping up as this like powerful new weapon
Absolutely.
in the fight, and we're going to be taking a really close look at just how effective it is.
Yeah.
We're talking real life examples, case studies, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I think it's particularly interesting because, for the average listener, we hear AI and we think, oh, that's, that's for the tech companies, that's for the Silicon Valley folks. But this is something that impacts all of our lives, and we're talking about our finances and our personal information. So, understanding how AI is being used to protect us is pretty crucial, I think.
It is. So to kick things off, I'm curious, before we had all this fancy AI stuff, how exactly did we use to detect fraud?
Well, it's funny to think about it now, but it was a very, very different world. It was all very manual, very reactive. Imagine like people actually sitting there with like stacks of paper records trying to like spot something fishy after the fact.
Like after the money's already gone, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And it was slow and incredibly labor intensive.
Yeah, that does not sound very efficient.
It wasn't. And then, of course, everything started to move online.
Right.
And suddenly we have this like explosion of digital transactions happening all the time.
At like lightning speed, right?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but the fraudsters, they got smarter too. They started using technology to their advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving behind these really complex data trails. It became impossible for humans to keep up.
So basically, we were just overwhelmed by the sheer amount of data, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Humans are good at a lot of things,
right,
but analyzing millions of transactions in real time, that's not really our forte.
That's not our strength, no. So enter AI. Right. It's like the cavalry coming over the hill.
Exactly.
What are some of the biggest advantages that AI brings to this fight?
Well, first of all, like we were just saying, it can handle those huge amounts of data.
Right.
We're talking like millions of transactions per second, no problem.
Oh, wow.
And it does it incredibly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, humans can't even comprehend that. Right?
No, not really. And then there's the pattern recognition. AI can pick up on these really subtle things, tiny anomalies that a human analyst might completely miss. It's like finding a needle in a haystack,
Yeah.
But AI is really good at that.
It's like it have a magnifying glass for data, right?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the most important thing is that it can adapt. The fraudsters are always coming up with new tricks, new scams.
Right.
But AI can actually learn from those new patterns.
Oh, wow.
And constantly update its defenses. It's not static. It's always evolving.
So it's like it's learning on the job, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's really fascinating. Now let's talk about the how the technical side of things a little bit.
Okay.
We hear these terms like machine learning and deep learning thrown around a lot. Can you break those down for us, in a way that we can all understand?
Sure. So machine learning, at its core, it's all about training algorithms on data.
Okay.
So in this case, we're talking about feeding the AI tons of data on past transactions, both legitimate and fraudulent ones. And the algorithm learns to recognize the differences, the patterns that distinguish one from the other.
So it's kind of like teaching a detective, right? You show them enough examples of crimes and they start to pick up on the clues, the telltale signs.
Right.
Same idea here with AI.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, and the more data it sees,
right,
the better it gets at spotting those red flags, those warning signs.
So the more it learns, the smarter it gets.
Exactly.
Okay, and deep learning, how does that fit into the picture?
So deep learning is kind of like the next level of machine learning.
Okay.
It uses these things called neural networks, which are basically like super complex systems inspired by the human brain.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It is. It is. But the basic idea is that these neural networks allow the AI to analyze really intricate relationships within the data.
Right.
And pick up on those really sophisticated fraud schemes that might involve like multiple steps.
Yeah, the ones that are harder to spot.
Exactly. It's like having a whole team of detectives, each with their own specialty, working together to crack a really complex case.
So instead of just one detective, you got a whole squad of them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, that's really helpful. So now, let's get to the good stuff, the real-world applications.
Okay.
You mentioned some examples of how AI is being used right now to fight fraud. Let's start with credit cards.
Right.
We've all gotten those alerts, like, did you make this purchase? How does that work?
So behind the scenes, there are AI algorithms that are constantly learning your spending habits.
Right.
Like where you usually shop, how much you spend, what time of day you make purchases.
So it builds like a profile of my normal spending.
Exactly. Like a financial fingerprint, almost.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then if there's a transaction that looks out of place, like if you suddenly make a huge purchase in a country you've never been to, the AI flags it as suspicious, and boom, you get that alert.
So it's like a little guardian angel watching over my credit card.
Pretty much, yeah. And, it can be a little annoying sometimes.
I know. Sometimes it's like, come on, just bought a sandwich, relax.
Right, exactly. But it's definitely better than having your card compromised.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a small price to pay for that peace of mind.
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
What about online banking? I mean, that's another area where people are always worried about security.
Oh, absolutely. And AI is playing a huge role there, too.
Okay.
So, for example, it can detect unusual login attempts, like if someone's trying to access your account from a device you've never used before, or from a location that's way off.
So if I'm in, like, New York, and someone tries to log in from, Siberia, that's going to raise a red flag.
Exactly. And it's not just about who's logging in, but also what they do once they're in. So AI also analyzes transaction patterns.
Okay.
Like if there's a sudden large transfer of money to an account you've never sent money to before, that's going to get flagged.
So it's watching not just the front door, but also what's going on inside the house.
Yeah, exactly. And it's doing all this in real time. It's not just looking back after the fact. It's constantly monitoring.
So that's really important. Now, insurance scams.
Yeah.
That's something that I never really thought about in terms of AI.
Yeah, it's not the first thing that comes to mind, but it's a big problem.
Right.
And AI is starting to make a real difference.
Okay.
So it can analyze all sorts of things, like the claimant's history, the details of the claim, even the language used in the claim documents.
Language. That's interesting. How does that work?
Yeah, so AI can look for inconsistencies in the story, unusual phrasing, or even just patterns of language that are common in fraudulent claims.
Like if they're using a lot of jargon or something.
Yeah, it could be something like that. Or maybe they're using the same phrases that have been used in other fraudulent claims.
Wow, so it's like it's building a database of like scam language.
Exactly. And it can compare new claims against that database to see if anything looks suspicious.
Okay, so it's catching those subtle things that a human might not even notice.
Right, because a human can only read so many claims. But AI can process thousands, millions.
Finally, you mentioned the stock market. That's such a complex beast.
Oh, it is. But AI is proving to be really useful there, too.
Okay.
It can help detect things like insider trading and market manipulation by analyzing all sorts of data. Communication records, trading activity, even news sentiment.
News sentiment, what does that mean?
So AI can actually analyze news articles and social media posts to gauge the overall feeling, positive or negative, around a particular stock.
Okay.
And if there's a sudden shift in sentiment, combined with unusual trading activity, that could be a sign that something fishy is going on.
So it's like connecting the dots between the news and the market movements.
Exactly.
Okay, it's amazing how much ground AI is covering in this fight against fraud. Now let's move on to those case studies you mentioned.
Okay.
Always love a good real-world example.
Yeah, they're really illuminating.
You talked about a bank that saw a huge drop in fraud after implementing AI.
Yeah, so this was a major international bank.
Okay.
And they implemented this new AI-powered system in early 2025.
Okay.
And the key was that it combined really sophisticated machine learning models with real-time analysis.
So it was learning from the past, but also reacting to what was happening in the moment.
Exactly. And the results were pretty incredible.
What kind of results did they see?
Well, within 6 months, they saw a 70% reduction in successful fraudulent transactions.
Wow, 70%. That's massive.
Yeah, it's huge. And not only that, but they also saw a big drop in false positives.
Right.
Those times when a legitimate transaction gets flagged as suspicious.
Yeah, which can be super frustrating for customers.
It is. So the AI was not only catching more bad guys, but it was also doing it more accurately, which means a better experience for everyone.
That's great. You also mentioned an e-commerce company that was dealing with a lot of online fraud.
Yeah, this was a big online retailer.
Yeah.
We'll call them Global Mart.
Global Mart. Okay.
And they were having a lot of problems with stolen credit cards and fake accounts.
Right. Yeah.
So they implemented this AI system that analyzed all sorts of data points during checkout.
Okay.
Like the buyer's IP address, the device they were using, their shipping address, their purchase history.
So it's painting a picture of the buyer, basically.
Yeah, and looking for anything that looks out of the ordinary.
Right.
And it was really effective. They saw a reduction in fraudulent transactions of over 50%.
Wow, that's huge for an online retailer. I mean, they must be dealing with tons of transactions every day.
Oh, absolutely, millions. And it also reduced chargebacks,
Right.
which are those fees that retailers have to pay when a customer disputes a charge.
Okay, so it's saving the money and protecting customers at the same time.
Exactly.
And the last case study was about an insurance company that was using AI to actually predict fraud before it happened.
Yeah, this is Secure Insure.
Secure Insure, okay?
And they implemented this AI platform that could assess the likelihood of a claim being fraudulent
Right.
right when it was submitted, even before they started investigating.
So they were like one step ahead of the game.
Exactly.
How did the AI do that?
Well, it analyzed the details of the claim,
Okay.
compared it against tons of historical data, even incorporated information from external sources.
It was really thorough.
Yeah, and based on all that, it assigned a risk score to each claim.
So they knew which ones to focus on first.
Exactly. And it worked. They saw a 25% increase in the detection of fraudulent claims within a year.
Okay, so they were catching more fraudsters and doing it more efficiently.
Yeah, and saving a lot of time and money in the process.
These case studies are really impressive. They show how AI is making a real difference in all these different sectors.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
You mentioned the real-time analysis aspect earlier. Why is that so crucial in this fight against fraud?
Well, the thing is, with traditional methods, you're often looking at data after the fact.
Right.
After the damage is already done.
Yeah.
But with AI, you can actually monitor transactions and behavior as they're happening.
Okay.
Which means you can potentially stop fraud before it even occurs.
That's amazing. So it's like having a security guard that's always on duty, always watching.
Exactly.
Okay, so AI is clearly a powerful weapon in this fight against fraud. But are there any challenges?
Yeah.
Any limitations that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, of course, there are always challenges. I mean, one of the biggest is that the fraudsters are constantly evolving too.
Yeah.
They're always coming up with new ways to try and beat the system.
So it's like an arms race, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a constant back and forth between the good guys and the bad guys.
And what about the future? What do you see happening in the next few years?
Well, I think we're going to see AI models getting even more sophisticated, learning and adapting even faster.
Okay.
We'll probably see more integration with other technologies like biometrics, things like fingerprint scanning and facial recognition.
Yeah.
And even behavioral analytics, which is really interesting.
What is behavioral analytics?
So it's basically analyzing how people interact with their devices and online accounts.
Okay.
Like how fast they type, how they move their mouse, even how they hold their phone.
Wow, that's getting really granular.
Yeah, and the idea is that if someone else takes over your account,
Right.
they might behave differently.
Right, their patterns would be different.
Exactly. So by analyzing those patterns, you can potentially detect fraud.
Okay, so the future of security is looking pretty high-tech.
Yeah, definitely. And I think AI is going to be at the heart of it.
Okay, so to wrap things up, we've seen how AI has gone from being this, futuristic concept to a real-world tool that's protecting us from all sorts of financial scams.
Yeah.
Whether it's those little alerts we get on our phones or those complex systems working behind the scenes, AI is out there keeping our money safe.
It is, and it's getting better all the time.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you all to ponder.
Okay.
As AI gets even smarter, even more powerful, we have to think about the potential downsides too. What if the bad guys start using AI to create even more sophisticated scams?
Right.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's something we need to be thinking about as a society.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI and financial fraud. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has. My pleasure.
Until next time, stay safe out there.